Of the few Jedi killing bounty hunters in the galaxy, none are as ruthless as Durge. Born from the gendai species, Durge was mostly an amalgamation of tendons and nerves with no bones nor vital organs. He had an extremely fast, rapid healing factor, which, combined with his powerful cybernetic armor, made him virtually unkillable. And with his power, he decided to make a sport out of killing Jedi, and he appears to know all the tricks of the trade. Many Jedi have tried to stop him, and many have either failed or died. Durge was absolutely insane. He was a bloodlusted creature, and he gave the Jedi a mountain of problems during the Clone Wars. But his history doesn't actually begin with the CIS, or really any time near the Clone Wars era. In fact, the species the Gendai were a long-lived one, and Durge himself may have been nearly 2,000 years old. And back in that day, he got his start in Jedi killing while rubbing elbows with the Dark Lords of the Sith. Welcome back to the archives, curious students of the Force and friends, and in today's video, we will be venturing back in time yet again to discover the origin of the unstoppable monster that was Durge. Durge was a member of the extremely rare species known as the Gendai. The peculiar nervous and circulatory systems of the Gendai makes them extremely resistant to physical injury. The Gendai physiology boasts millions of nerve clusters throughout the body, and a vascular system that distributes blood without the need of a central heart, lacking the vulnerable vital organs of most humanoids. A Gendai could sustain multiple lacerations, or even complete dismemberment, and simply walk it off. In addition to these impressive feats of endurance, the distributed neural network gives the Gendai phenomenal reflexes, but Durge himself was cybernetically enhanced as well on top of all of this in order to improve his already insane reflexes, putting him on the level of a trained Force sensitive. Usually, Gendai are actually a docile species by nature, which makes Durge an anomaly. You see, they are a nomadic people since their homeworld has been lost to the ages. Due to a low birth rate, the Gendai are very rarely encountered, and they usually avoid confrontation if ever possible. Though the Gendai are physically suited for a long life, some of them live up to 4,000 years old. However, their minds do weaken with age. Reportedly, they are susceptible to depression, hysteria, and other forms of psychosis. This would become very important for Durge later in his life. When Durge was born, he was already regarded as an exceptional physical specimen, but he was predisposed to an aggression that was foreign to his people, and an insatiable bloodlust. This would increase the first time that he saw bounty hunters in action, and from that point forward, Durge would embrace a life of pure violence. He would leave his tribe and venture into the galaxy with the desire to become a hunter, which would put him in the path of the Mandalorians. One Mandalorian in particular. The Mandalorian's name was Jang, and he was a member of the now lost Tuong species, a veteran of the Mandalorian Wars. Jang had actually been a part of the group under the leadership of a man by the name of Unk Cusp, but he would later leave the group after deeming them to have no honor. Jang would then take Durge under his wing and would teach him all about bounty hunting and the Mandalorian art, molding Durge into a formidable warrior. Durge looked up to Jang as his master and even as a father. He respected him a great deal for his skill and power, but eventually, the two would have to face facts. The galaxy was shifting around them as the Jedi and Sith became far more prevalent, and if they wanted to survive this new evolution, the hunters would need to evolve as well. This part of the story we get from Star Wars visionaries in the short story titled Prototype. The two hunters would be approached by a strange doctor who offered to augment their bodies with cybernetics, make them invincible. This would make them essentially the greatest hunters in the galaxy. Jang and Durge would travel to this world where they would be met by the doctor. There, he promised to make them his masterpieces. Both Jang and Durge agreed to subject themselves to these experiments, though Durge was a bit dubious about the entire situation. The doctor then began his work, though he would have a hard time with Durge's physiology. Durge's body kept attempting to heal itself over every time the doctor tried to augment it, but eventually he did complete his work. And once the procedure was done, the two had been completely transformed into powerhouses of cybernetic gifts. To test out their new abilities, Durge and Jang entered a sparring match, fighting one of the doctor's other creations, a female by the name of Nubel. As they fought, the doctor explained his work, saying that he had melded their bodies to their armor, providing many improvements such as making their armor's computer systems work in tandem with their own neural networks. This enabled them to automatically track any incoming hostile fire. Their helmet's visual arrays employed a new targeting system directly linked to their own eyes and their optic nerves. This meant that all they had to do was look at their target and their weapon would find its mark. Their suits also provided internal equilibrium feedback for enhanced balance, recovery, and counterattack. The armor also delivered as much or little physical force as they required, allowing them to move exactly how they wished. It didn't even require any effort on their part. All they had to do was move as they normally would, and the armor would respond in turn. This gave them superhuman levels of speed and accuracy, and with the enhancements, the cybernetic killing machine known as Durge was officially born. But things were about to get bad. The Doctor would tell them that their bargain had come to an end and that he had stolen a Sith artifact from a group of Mandalorians, specifically from the former leader of Tang, Ong Cusp, and needed the protection of the Hunters. As the two of them were about to fulfill their end, the Mandalorians breached the front door in pursuit of the Sith artifact. At that moment, the door exploded open and the Mandalorians poured in huge numbers. Durge, Jang, and Nubel all fought against the clan and annihilated their former brothers, falling into a bloodlust. The Mandalorians were no match for the monsters that they had found themselves fighting, with it being shockingly Jang, the former Mandalorian, that killed the most Mandos that day. Once the entire first squad had been executed, Jang was shouting in triumph, but he did not see the thermal detonator roll in between his legs until it was too late. All three of the cyborgs were caught up in the explosion and were ultimately defeated. The rest of the clan of Mandalorians entered the room and began to gloat over Jang's half-dead body. The Mandalorians promised that they would take his head and deliver it to their leader. While this was occurring, Durge's body was beginning to heal. Each tendon was growing together anew, putting himself back into commission. Jang managed to at least gut one of the distracted Mandalorians with his tusk before getting hit with a fatal blaster bolt to the chest. Durge, seeing this, leapt into action, believing his master to have been murdered. Bloodlusted, he began tearing the Mandalorians apart with his bare hands, sending the group running. Durge chased after them, following them out of the facility with the intent to hunt and kill each and every one of them. But that was when the Doctor came back and returned Nubel's lightsaber to her, revealing that she was in fact a Sith Lord. He then spoke to the dying Jang, showing that the entire thing had been a ploy by him to incite a war, one between the Mandalorians and the Sith. Back to Durge, he would presumably hunt down and kill every single member of the clan before the start of what would be the new Sith Wars. The Brotherhood of Darkness under Lord Khan went to war with the Jedi's Army of Light, and somewhere in the galaxy, Darth Bane would be training to become a Sith Lord. Durge's lust for battle had not been satiated with the blood of the Mandalorians though. They had died too easy, and he desired a true challenge for his new enhancements. With the spark of a new war, the new challenge presented itself. The challenge was Jedi. Durge allied himself with the last remaining Sith Lords under Khan, and would serve them as a valiant warrior until the end of the war. Durge fought in many battles and killed many Jedi, learning their fighting techniques while developing weaponry and tactics to counter their ability to touch the Force. Durge also learned from the Sith. This was when the galaxy first saw Durge as the Jedi killing machine, the greatest that they had seen in millennia. The Jedi he was killing were no ordinary Jedi. They were of the Old Republic. Their fighting prowess and saber skill were so refined because of the fact that they fought Sith regularly. These were not Clone Wars Jedi, and the fact that Durge was successful against them speaks to the height of his power. It doesn't seem that history remembers Durge very much during this era though. The Jedi had been so focused on the Sith as the primary threat that they didn't think to mention this new creature, even though he was growing in efficiency in murdering the Jedi. And that was because when the war ended, Durge himself would vanish, without a trace among the stars. After the thought bomb went off on the world of Ruusan, ending the existence of the Sith in the wider galaxy in the war, Durge went into hiding, trying to avoid any Jedi retaliation. Durge knew that he would be on the Jedi's hit list for a long time to come, and so he would lay low for the next 9 centuries, hopping back and forth through several aliases to keep his identity secure as the famous Jedi Killer. He would have to stay his hand from killing during this time, and just like the Sith, Durge too went into hiding. Soon though, he would come out of his temporary retirement. Some 100 years before the Battle of Naboo, Durge was hired to kill the leader of the Mandalorians at the time, This was when the Mandalorian Civil War was at its apex. Of course, Durge couldn't pass up an opportunity to stick it to the people who had brutally murdered his master centuries earlier. Durge had grown to hate the Mandalorians just as much as the Jedi, and the time for bloodshed again arose. Though Durge managed to assassinate the leader of the rival Mandalorians, the Mandalorians would take their own pound of flesh. As they achieved the impossible, they captured Durge, the thing that the Jedi were never capable of. But of course, they were ruthlessly brutal in their vengeance. They turned Durge's longevity against him, finding new ways to inflict pain across his scattered nerves. He was a victim of unspeakable torture, unable to die. Eventually though, Durge escaped and retreated to the unknown regions to hibernate and recover. It took him nearly a century to undo the damage that the Mandalorians had done, but although his physical body had healed, Durge's already dangerous psyche was pushed past the brink of sanity. As we mentioned earlier, the gendai aren't very stable mentally as it is, and Durge was now reaching the age where his people began to mentally deteriorate. When Durge emerged from his slumber, he sought vengeance on the Mandalorians. By now, he had lost all sight of the honor that he had once held as Jang's student. However, he was cheated of his revenge as he learned that the true Mandalorian warriors had gone all but extinct, replaced now by a pacifist society that had abandoned their warrior ways. Left now without a purpose, Durge was awakened to a galaxy at war. A galaxy where the Jedi were leading clone troopers to war. Clones that all shared the same face of a Mandalorian. Dooku, who was aware of exactly who Durge was because of his legendary status, would eventually lure the cyborg into his ranks, and the ancient bounty hunter relished an ironic twist in fate and a quest for retribution. It didn't matter if he was killing real Mandalorians or not. Durge was pleased to slaughter their clone successors while constantly testing his skill against the Jedi. This was Durge's dream. But of course, Durge had trained himself to fight the powerful knights of the Old Republic. The Jedi of the Clone Wars were very little match to this monster, a creature that had terrorized the Old Republic Jedi, and only the premier members of the Jedi Order ever stood a chance against Durge. It's shocking to discover exactly how old Durge actually is. He's thousands of years old. And not only this, he is a creation and an ally of the Sith for nearly his entire life. He is truly insane, and it takes some of the most powerful Jedi to contend with him, Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi being the premier ones. For a period of time, beings called Durge the most skilled warrior in the galaxy. They said he was so good at killing because of how much fun he had doing it. This is what he was born to do, and it was his favorite pastime by far. But anyway friends, what are your thoughts on Durge, his history with the Jedi, Sith, and the Mandalorians? And compared to other greats like Cad Bane, Boba, and Jango Fett, where does Durge rank as a bounty hunter? As always my friends, thank you so much for stopping by the channel and the archives today, and may the Force be with you.